Welcome back to Final Jeopardy! The category is the most hated people in America. The clue is his award-winning documentary, Bowling for Columbine, sparked a 13-minute standing ovation at Cannes. Mr. Contest Chair, fellow Toastmasters and guests, you wrote, Michael Moore. Has to be a question. Who is Michael Moore? That's what I wanted to know. Who is Michael Moore? According to a survey in the New York Post, he is the 5th most hated person in America. Right after number 4, Kim Kardashian. But why? His scathing documentaries expose crooked politicians and greedy corporations and wacko gun lovers. Could it be because the way he paints America is so unflattering? Or is it because he's made it big and still goes around wearing a baseball cap? Now, I wanted to know more about him, so I read his autobiography called Here Comes Trouble. And in there, I read a story that I hope you'll find inspiring. In 1971, at the age of 17, Michael Moore attended Boys State, which is a one-week residential program where high school boys are chosen to learn about state politics by pretending to run for state government. So how did this future provocateur take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? He stayed in his room and wrote poetry. Well, even aspiring poets need to eat. So, every day he would walk down the hall and dine at the vending machine. And that's where he met his muse, his inspiration. It was love at first bite. Day after day, he wrote beautiful poetry to the sounds of crunch, crunch, crunch. On the 4th day, on one of his many trips to the vending machine, he saw a poster on the wall. Speech contest, like this one, on the life of Abraham Lincoln. Give a speech and you could win a prize, sponsored by the Elks Club. Have you ever heard of the Elks Club? Well, Michael Moore had, and he did not like the Elks Club because they said you had to be Caucasian to join their golf club. Now, they weren't the Ku Klux Klan or anything, but any organization that would prevent blacks from joining their clubs was an affront to his belief system. And he thought, what hypocrisy! Didn't Lincoln free the slaves? So he thought to himself, if they want a speech, I'll give them a speech they'll never forget. His diatribe, disguised as a speech, began like this, in my best 17-year-old Michael Moore voice. How dare the Elks Club besmirch the fine name of Abraham Lincoln by sponsoring a contest like this? Have they no shame? How is it that an organization that will not allow black people into their club is allowed in here to spread their bigotry in the guise of doing something good? If we are to endorse any form of segregation, then by all means let it be the segregation that separates these racists from the rest of us who believe in the American way. And that was just the beginning. He spent the rest of the night rehearsing his speech, and the next morning walked into the auditorium and delivered his speech to a high school teacher and 12 other contestants. Now, the other speeches were boring stuff about Lincoln's accomplishments, and it was all over. Guess who won first place? It was Michael Moore. He wasn't trying to win, he just wanted to say something. And he was glad it was all over. Then the judge came up to him and said, Michael, you'll have to give this speech again tomorrow at the closing ceremonies for Boys State. Well, after a sleepless night, he walked into the larger auditorium to see 2,000 people looking at him, and the head of the Elks Club, who obviously hadn't heard what the speech was about, because he was all smiles as Moore walked up to the lectern and began to speak. To say that the audience was surprised by what they heard would be an understatement. They were in shock. You could see it on their faces. So he started speeding up in order to get it over more quickly. He sped faster and spoke faster and faster. He was speaking so fast that by the end of his speech, he ad-libbed one more line. He turned to the head elk and said, "And you can keep your stinking trophy." Well, there was a reporter from a local paper there covering the closing ceremonies who filed a report about what Michael Moore had done on the Newswire. And by the next day, what he said was all over the country. Speech requests started pouring in. He was even asked to speak at a Senate committee hearing that was drafting a bill to prevent clubs from discriminating on the basis of race. Well, he didn't want any of this attention, but the issue never went away until the laws were passed and private clubs were no longer allowed to do this when they had members join. I want you to take a moment and think about what he did and what you could do with your Toastmasters skills. Michael Moore wasn't trying to change America that day. He was just looking for more ruffles. And what he found was his voice, and with that he made a difference. Not with a petition, his voice. Not with a film crew, just his voice. Could you make a difference with your voice? Could you create a spark that catches the winds of change, lighting fires here, there, and everywhere? Let your voice be heard. The audience is listening. And if you're successful, you may end up on a list of most loved people. Mr. Contest Chair.